All right, good morning, everybody. How we doing? Horrible? Oh, couldn't be horrible. It's got to be awesome because we're here for 3D, right? You guys have a good Thanksgiving? Oh, horrible. Okay, I got a glass half empty in the middle row here. Anybody else have a bad time or everybody else pretty good? Pretty good. Good. All right. Well, you got a long life ahead of you and many Thanksgivings, so there's going to be some good ones and some bad ones. You just weather them out. Um, And I know probably the hardest day is Monday after Thanksgiving because you come back with your nice tryptophan buzz and you got a lot of time having fun playing Fortnite and stuff like that, and not a lot of time on studies. Ugh. And so this is a really rough day. But let me tell you, unfortunately, the way this class is being set up for December, we've got 4 weeks of information that we're trying to get into 3. So what that means is we got to bring our A game every day, regardless of how tired or excited we are about Sugar Plum Fairies and what have you. We got to do the job. Does that make sense? We got to do the work. So make sure you're dialed in every day. Make sure you get something to eat, some water, something like that. Make sure you're fresh and snappy when you get in here because we have a lot of information to cover in a very, very short period of time. And you really don't want to miss anything because it's really going to hinder your ability to be successful in here with anything that you miss. Does that make sense? So it's tough, and I know you want to focus on those Sugar Plum Fairies, but I need you to be in here with me every day, giving it your best, and we will get through this, and then after we do all this hard work, then it's Sugar Plum Fairies for everybody, so we can have a lot of fun at that point. Does that make sense? Can I get a hell yeah? There we go. Yay. All right. There's a little bit of talking back. Excellent. So my name is Steve. I was not here the first day. I teach this class with Brian. We work together as a team. And as you guys were told, good idea to watch lectures 1, 2, and 3 prior to coming back to class. How many of you guys did that? Just by show of hands. Okay, bad showing on that front. All right. The reason we wanted you guys to take a look at that stuff is because, again, the more familiar you are with the material, the better you're going to be, and the more you're going to get out of each and every class. I recommend watch the lectures before you come to lecture. So today's lecture 2, next lecture, obviously 3. Try to watch lecture 3 before you come to lecture 3 because you're going to get more out of each lecture when you do that because all of the terms you will be familiar with, and then you can concentrate on concepts at that point. Does that make sense? Because oftentimes terms can throw you off. So know the terms, feel familiar with the material. You don't have to own it yet, but feel familiar with the material so that when you come back and see me and we talk about it, you're ready to go. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. So great way to run this class, just like that. And the more you know coming in every day, the more you get out of each day. You're not reinventing the wheel each time. So it'll be pretty good. All right, now we have, as always, lots of material to cover. However, I want to make sure that everybody is taking great notes, asking lots and lots of questions, and again, getting the most out of every class. We cover a lot of material, and I don't want you to miss anything because any information you don't have, you come to a grinding halt when you come to that point. And that's very frustrating when you're on your own. You know, when you're in lecture, that's fine because we're here to help you. When you're in lab, that's fine because we're here to help you. When you're in the Google Hangout, we're here to help you, so no big deal. But a lot of this work is going to be done at home by yourself. And if your notes are insufficient, that's where you're going to come to a grinding halt and you really can't move forward. And that's really frustrating. And I've been there, so believe me, I know exactly how that goes. So please do make sure to take notes. Even if you're watching the videos in my digital friends, when you guys are watching the videos, take notes to the information. The reason that's critically important is because if you've got a 2-hour lecture to listen to, you don't know where that specific information you're looking for is. You can spend, a lot of time just kind of scrubbing to try to find where's that one thing he said. So if you make sure you write it down, I mean, you could even jot down the time that I wrote it, in terms of the video, and then you can go right back to that if you need to hear that again or see that again, and that'll save you a tremendous amount of time. Does that make sense? Get a hell yeah on that? Hell yeah. Okay, good. So utilize these tools well, and that's the key to being successful in here. All right, so let's get into today's material. And again, as always, we hit the ground running. So my assumption is that yesterday we had lecture 1, so you're ready for lecture 2. So here we go. Lecture 2. Woo! What are we talking about today? Amongst the many things we're going to discuss, we are going to get into proportion and scale. They seem very similar. They're definitely different. So hopefully you'll be able to pick up on the distinction between them. All right, proportion. The idea of proportion is when we are comparing parts of an object to other parts of the same object, we're talking about proportion. So for instance, with people, we typically measure them as 7 or 7.5 heads tall. Superheroes tend to be 10 heads tall because they are bigger and more epic than the rest of us. But the idea being we use the head as an arbitrary unit of measurement to figure out the relative size of the other parts of the character. And this can help us fill in some information that we might not be getting as accurately as we like from our reference material. So proportion is an arbitrary means of measuring parts of an object using other parts of the same object. Now, where this can come in particularly helpful is when we are dealing with identification. Now, as modelers, and that's what we are this month, as modelers, job one is hit silhouette. Silhouette is the most important thing. If I see the shadowy outline of an object, I should be able to tell exactly what it is. That's the aspect of recognition that we're trying to achieve as modelers. So if I'm looking at a character, I can actually utilize elements of proportion to determine gender. Again, recognition. Female characters tend to be narrower at the shoulder, a little bit wider at the hips. Male characters tend to be wider at the shoulder and narrower at the hips. Now, in terms of the bell curve of humanity, there's always going to be people on either side, but most of us fit within those types of parameters. So just from the shadowy outline, we could determine the gender of a character. And again, recognition from silhouette is one of those key things that you do as a modeler. What are we talking about? Other cool things that you can learn from proportion is if your reference is not really helping you out a lot in terms of how big or small to make something, because sometimes your reference is not ideal, but you still have to build the thing you're asked to build. So when it comes to that, let's say, for example, I'm trying to model a character's head, and I'm trying to figure out how far apart to space the eyes. Well, typically, proportionals with humans, there's one eye distance between the two eyes. So if you're unsure because your reference is not as clear, you can utilize that information about proportion to help you fill in that information. And then you can actually model things accurately. Again, there are people whose eyes are further apart than that and eyes that are closer together. There always are, variation within the species. But most of us fit within that range in terms of acceptable or typical proportions for the human face. Does that make sense? So proportions are very handy in terms of, again, recognition and getting the proportion of an object correct. As a result, because this is important, obviously this is something we're grading on. So in terms of proportion, let's say that this is the reference image we gave you, the thing you're trying to build, right? These models would represent close enough to the proportion of the reference image we gave you that you would earn all the points associated with proportion. Okay? These models are all too different. They are not close enough. Therefore, you do not earn the points for proportion. Does that make sense? Now, in looking at these examples, what you start to see right away with proportion is there's really not a lot of deviation in there. Does that make sense? These silhouettes look very, very similar to that. So not a lot of flexibility with proportion. So you have to be on. Now, the good news is with proportion, that's relatively easy to hit because we are going to be using image planes and basically tracing image planes using polygon geometry in order to build objects. So that's really going to help us out a lot with proportion. But as I've said, not always do we have great reference to work from. So anything that we know and understand about proportions can really help us out when it comes to trying to build something. And believe me, I have been there where I'm trying to build something that is an extremely complex shape and the reference is just not really there. I can't really make out the information that I need. Then I have to start making intelligent decisions about how things should be spaced and proportioned in order to make this thing work. Does that make sense? And that's where you really start earning your money as an artist, because filling in the gaps and making it look right, despite the lack of information, that is probably one of the harder parts. Make sense? Get a hell yeah on that? Okay, any questions on proportion, this idea? We're looking at the proportion, parts of an object compared to other parts of the same object, and there are points associated with that. Okay? Scale. Scale is different because what we're doing when we're looking at scale is we are looking at two totally separate objects and comparing them to each other. For example, if you take a look at this image, you might say, well, I don't know. Are those toy tugboats or are those real tugboats? What do you guys think? How many of you think they're toy tugboats? All right. How many of you guys think they're real tugboats? Where's online going?
2 toys and 1 reel.
2 toys and 1 reel. Those are toy tugboats. These are little remote control guys. You can drive them at SeaWorld. Put a quarter in the machine. But kind of difficult to tell here because I don't really have anything to work off of, right? These little numbers here are kind of a giveaway. Difficult to determine from that, but kind of a giveaway. So what I need is some other object that I can compare these things to, and then that gives me a whole world of scale from that. So for example, if I look at this image here, I say, oh, all right, I get it. That guy is huge. Or these guys are teeny weeny, and I'm not sure which it is. But scale becomes readily apparent as soon as I have something else to compare it to. So proportion, parts of an object compared to other parts of the same object, versus scale, which is one object compared to an entirely separate object. Now, you might be wondering, well, okay, where does scale come in terms of the things that we build for this class or any other environment? When we are building anything in 3D, everything is built in parts. And what that means is, let's say, for example, I'm modeling this classroom and all of you people and all of the computers and all of the copies, which shouldn't be up there, and all the stuff that's on the table, right? That doesn't, you don't build the room and then build the projector and then build the desks and then build all the people. We are working as a team. We are a CG production pipeline. So what happens is different people are responsible for different objects. So one person builds desks and chairs, somebody else builds laptops and water bottles, somebody else builds people. Does that make sense? Those are all separate files. So ultimately what happens is we take all these files, we bring them together and put them into a master file, and then that's the environment in its entirety with everything in it. Does that make sense? As a result, everybody has to use the same scale, or when we bring all the objects together, nothing's the right size. So if we all have the same scale that we are working from, when we bring all these things together, they all match, they all fit, everything goes together and everything's the right size. Does that make sense? Get a hell yeah? Okay, so how do we use this for this class? Because obviously this is a key element. All right, now let's say this is my environment, right? These objects are the right size relative to each other. That's scale. As soon as you see something that doesn't look like it fits, it's very obvious, right? When the scale is incorrect. And then now we have to start trying to size things, get things to fit together properly. Now there's a lot of, well, now what do we do? And literally you waste a lot of time trying to figure out what's the right size to build things relative to each other. So for our class, we have a scale that we are all working from. And that is 1 grid unit in Maya is equal to 1 inch in the real world. 1 grid unit in Maya is equal to 1 inch in the real world. What's a grid unit? All right, grid units. When you are inside Maya, hi Maya, you'll see we have these grids. Grid unit. All right, when we go into our orthographic views, they can help us figure out the relative height of something. So when we're building objects, 1 grid unit in Maya is equal to 1 inch. So I have 2 ways of figuring out how big to make an object. Number 1, I can measure that object. If I have the actual physical object, I can put a ruler up next to it, figure out how big it is, and 1 inch of height of the object is equal to 1 grid unit. So if it's a 5-inch object, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's how big it needs to be. Does that make sense? Hell yeah? Okay, so that's one way for us to determine. The other way that we can do that is we can look at our reference images, because we have all these groovy reference images for the stuff that we want to build, right? Let's say we're building, let me go to my level 1 assets. I'm building the coil. And incidentally, every object that you're going to build, there's always a source images folder, and it contains reference images for you to work from. Not every image has been brought into Maya for you to look at in terms of the modeling of that object, but there's some of these things that will allow you to see other views of the object that are not posted for you and give you information in terms of detail you need to build. Does that make sense? Make sure you're looking into the source images folder. But if we go to any object and we're trying to figure out how big it is, you'll notice that there's a grid in the background of the objects we're building. All right? 2 of these squares within the grid are equal to 1 inch in Maya, or 1 grid in Maya. Does that make sense? 2 of these is equal to 1 grid in Maya, or 1 inch. So if you take a look at this object and you see it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 grid units, it's going to be 6 grid units in Maya. Does that make sense? So you have 2 sources to figure out the relative size of an object so that you can build it the right size. Now, do you have to have it the right size right from go? Not at all. All right? Build the object as closely to the reference image as you can. Obviously, as modelers, that's our job. Once you are done, then you make the object the correct size. Does that make sense? So now you've got this object in its own file, and it is the right size. That way, when you bring that object into other files, which you're going to have to do, it's already the right size and you don't have to worry about it. Does that make sense? Take care of it in advance. You can do it later if you want to. More frustrating. Doing it in advance, you will be much happier. Does that make sense? Did I get your question?
That was my question.
All right, good. Everybody clear on this? We're good? The relative scale in Maya that we are using for our project? Okay, because every project has a different scale. It doesn't make any difference. For us, we are using 1 grid unit in Maya is equal to 1 inch, which is equal to 2 grids in any image that we give you. Okay, looks like we got that one. Good. All right, how's digital doing, Brian?
Doing good.
Excellent.
Their notes going.
Yes, right. All very important stuff. And the crazy thing about writing your notes, and I don't know if Brian mentioned this, we have been learning for thousands of years by writing stuff down. It works really, really well because it's sort of a kinesthetic element. You know, the physical properties or the physical aspect of writing something helps you remember it better. Even if you don't go back to your notebook, you will remember it better. And it works better than typing because when you're typing, you're thinking more letters. You know, where's the E, where's the R? Dang it, I keep hitting Q. I don't want that one, you know. So it doesn't have quite the retention quality that writing does. Also my favorite, notebooks never run out of power, so they never go dead on you while you're taking notes. And then number 2, when it comes to your notes, you can draw pictures. And I'm a very visual guy. I love to draw pictures of stuff, particularly things I don't understand, because when I see it again in my little drawing, I recognize it right away. So, and you can't really do that when you're typing. So that my recommendation on that front, and why. All right. Let's get into a little vocabulary thing. Anytime you see one of these periwinkle colored banners, you know that's a vocabulary thing. And then again, that's something that we are grading on. So very important you know and understand this information. Layers are a great way to organize things. We use layers in Maya, much like you use layers in Photoshop. Not quite as powerful as the layers in Photoshop, but a similar concept in that we can show things, hide things, template things, lock them. These are all things that we can do with these layers, and they are definitely a key element of organization. It's kind of like if I had all of my clothes, you know, we'll assume they're all clean, and I've got them in a big basket. It's kind of difficult to find the stuff you want. But if we have a dresser, we can put socks in a drawer, we can put shirts in a drawer, pants in a drawer, shorts in a drawer. We just open the drawer we want and we have the things we need. Does that make sense? So dresser helps us to organize. Layers in Maya help us to organize. So let's take a look at layer creation, because you are going to need to create a layer for every object that you build. So let's say I'm in Maya. Hi, Maya. And I build a cylinder. It's the greatest cylinder ever made, right? I love this cylinder. In fact, I like it so much, I'm going to name my geometry because that's really important too. And I'm going to call it Bob. All I have to do is select the object in object mode. Got to be selected, got to be object mode. Click up here in the field, give the object a name. Please name things. Please. Doesn't have to be the scientific clinical name, right? I don't need to see Latin, but there should be a name up there other than its default name. I don't want to see P cylinder anything, P cube anything. Everything gets a name. So my cylinder, Bob, is the greatest cylinder ever, and I want to make a layer for it. It's a very simple process. If you go to layers and click with the left mouse button, LMB, you will get create empty layer. So I'm going to click on that, and now I've got this layer. However, all I did is create it at this point. It is not a functional layer. So here's what I need to do. Number one, I got to name my layer. We name everything when we're working. Name as you go. You don't want to let that stuff pile up on you. It's kind of like Photoshop. If you don't name your layers, you've got 100 layers, you don't know what's on what layer, and it becomes a disaster. So double click on the layer, left mouse button, and here's where I'm going to name it, and I'm going to call it Bob layer. Bob layer. All right, and I save it. Now, still not a functional layer. I have a layer, but it's not doing anything yet. I want to add this object to that layer. As long as the layer is selected, and you know that because it's light blue in color here, and the object is selected, again, you have to select the object. If you hover your cursor over the layer, hold down the right mouse button, you can choose Add Selected Objects. Now this object is on that layer. And the way I can tell is if I click, you'll see there's a little box up here up front that says V. That's visibility. It's kind of like the eyeball in Photoshop. If I click on that and the object disappears, that is a fully functional layer. Does that make sense? Every object you build should have a layer. And when you click the V for visibility, every piece of that object should disappear. If the object is made of 3 pieces, all 3 pieces should disappear when you click that layer. Does that make sense? Get a hell yeah? Okay, so make sure you get that visibility working. That is a fully functional layer. I will now receive credit for that. If any of those aspects are missing, you don't get credit for the layer. All right. So here we are, layers, very helpful for organization. Make sure we create those. All right, let's talk a little bit about polygons. In terms of polygons, let's say this was a woodworking class. We would learn all about wood, right? We would talk about the different varieties of wood. Some are hard, some are soft, some are good for this, some are good for that. We would talk about wood grain, the use of tools. We need to understand the material we're working with. So we're going to be talking about polygons, so we need to understand how they work, what they're made of, and what we can do with them. All right, in terms of polygons, there's a lot of terms that you will hear, and that kind of makes them confusing. You will hear polygon mesh, polygon geometry, polygons, geometry mesh. You'll hear single faces referred to as polygons, and it kind of gets a little bit confusing. What am I actually talking about? But all of these terms refer to polygons or geometry. And again, whether you're talking about a whole object or parts of an object, they are referred to at times as a polygon. So a little bit tricky here and there. Polygons as an object actually come in 2 different modes. There is object mode and there is component mode. Now, object mode you've all seen already, right? You've done your lecture 1 skill check, and we've seen Captain Idaho, put him together, right? How many of you guys did that assignment already? Good, good. All right, so in terms of Captain Idaho moving pieces around, when we first see polygon geometry and we select it and it lights up green like that, that means we are in object mode. We are dealing with it as a whole entity, whatever that thing happens to be. However, we also have component mode. Now, component mode is kind of dealing with the parts that come together to make the whole object. For example, you can talk about me, Steve, a single entity, an object. However, there are many components that come together to make me. We could talk about me in terms of the many organs that come together to make me. We could talk about me in terms of the many cells that come together to make me. These are all the components that are me. Does that make sense? Okay, polygons are the same way. This is object mode. I'm dealing with the whole entity. However, we also have component mode. Now, in terms of component mode, we have 3 major components when it comes to modeling. We have the vertice, or the vertex. We have the edge, and we have the face. Vertices are points in space that define shape. Wherever the vertex is, if you move it, you change the shape of the object. Again, vertices are points in space that define shape. If you have two or more vertices, Maya will connect them together with a straight line. And it's actually kind of the rule of polygon geometry that between 2 points, you can only have a straight line. That straight line we refer to as an edge. If you have 3 or more edges connected to each other, Maya will shade in the surface and you have a face. That's the largest of the component levels. All right, let's take a look at these bad boys and how they work. Sorry, Bob. All right, so here's my cube. It is currently in object mode. I know it's in object mode because it's green when I select it. When it's not selected, it's just gray. If I want to get to component mode, I hover my cursor over the geometry and I hold down the right mouse button. You will see a circular menu set over a larger rectangular one. We're going to be dealing with the circular menu set. The smallest of the components is the vertex or the vertice. When I go to vertex mode, my geometry turns light blue. That's an indication of I'm in component mode. And what you will notice is these cute little pinkish purple dots appear wherever edges meet. Those are the vertices, or vertex, or vert. They have many different names. And again, these are points in space that define shape. So if you select a vertex or vertice, and you go to your toolbox, these are our tools of manipulation. If I go to, say, the move tool, I can then move the vertices, and you'll see, oh, wow, that actually changes the shape of the object. Now, in terms of changing the shape of the object, I can select one vertice, hold Shift, which is add to selection, and I can select a second vertice, and I can move them together. Not only can I move them, I can also, if I want to, rotate them. I can also, if I want to, scale them. All of these things will enable me to move the vertices, which change the shape of the object. Make sense? Get a hell yeah? Awesome. All right. Let's take a look at some more components. Right mouse button over the geometry straight up to the edge. Now when I go to edge mode, I'm actually able to select the line or the edge on the polygon geometry. Now you'll notice the pinkish purple dots are gone. That's okay. Now I can grab an edge. And again, I can do the same things with them. I can move them. I can rotate them. And I can scale them. All right. Now, when I'm moving an edge, though, what do you guys notice that I'm also moving? The vertices on either side of that edge. So when I move an edge, I'm moving 2 vertices. Very good. All right. Now, the last component level we're talking about here, right mouse button down the bottom, face. When I go to face mode, I literally can select the entire shaded area here, which again, I can move. I can rotate. And I can scale. All of these things allow me to change the shape of the object. Now, when I'm moving a face, what am I also moving? Vertices and edges, quite a few of them. Does that make sense? Depending on the shape of the face. So why do I have different component levels? Why do I bother with so much? Why, I could probably get away with 2, right? What do I need 3 for? How many of you guys have ever painted a room? Anybody? Okay, I hate painting. Moving is number 1, painting number 2. But in terms of painting a room, if you're gonna paint the wall, do you use like a little brush? What do you use on walls? The big roller, right? Because it slaps a lot of paint on the wall quickly and evenly, so you can get done right? It'd take forever with a small brush. But a lot of walls have molding, right, down at the bottom, and it's usually a gloss, right? Can I use the roller on the molding? No, that's not going to work. I'm going to need like a medium-sized brush, right? Or one of those cool sponge ones. So that'll work too, but I'm going to need a different size brush. What if I'm painting the windowsill? Can I use a medium-sized brush on a windowsill? If I'm trying to paint, I need a very small brush. So the deal is, when I'm trying to create small detail and I need more fine control, I use a smaller brush. When I'm trying to make a bigger change, I use a big roller. Components work the same way. You don't want to push and pull vertices all day long to make a complex shape change. That's going to take forever. There is a speed to your workflow when you're working with the right component level. You want to make sure if you're making a big change, you're using your big components. If you're making a small change, you use your smaller components. Does that make sense? Hell yeah? Okay. So this is why we have the components, and that's what they do. All right. And as I said, between 2 points, we only have a straight line. It's kind of the rule of polygons. So in order to have curvature, we need more components. You guys ready for an activity? Yeah, of course. Enough talking, please. All right. As promised, we have activities throughout the lecture so that you can practice what we've talked about. What I love about these activities is, number one, it kind of breaks up the talking, so it's not just talking for 2 hours, which is brutal. Believe me, me too. But what it allows you to do is demonstrate for me and for you that you understand what we talked about. Because I only teach you the information you need to know to do the activity. So if we open up the activity and your first question is, I have no idea what to do, you need to change how you're approaching this class. That is letting you know right here, right now, that your approach is not working. Does that make sense? Literally, on a daily basis, we can see, and I mean you and me, how well you're doing, how well you are retaining the information based on your level of success with these activities. Does that make sense? Okay, so if we're going to be doing an activity file, you know we have to do what? Set the project to that activity file folder to let Maya know, hey, I want to work on this now. This is what we're going to do, and get Maya ready, and then we will open files. So first we set the project. Again, all good things happen when we start by doing that. File, set project. All right, now I'm going to navigate to where my activity file folder is. Yours could be in a different place. I keep mine in my documents folder. And I've got a folder in here that I call 3DF. The year and the month that I took 3DF is on there. So you put the year and the month that you took it. And then inside of that, I have my activity file folder, my skill check file folder, the assets that I'm going to be building, all the stuff that I need for this class. Again, where the heck is my stuff is a huge time saver. So know where your things are. So I'm going to go to my activity file folder. I only need to select the outer folder. I don't need to double click on it. I don't need to go inside. All I need to do is select the outer folder. And that the only reason that's the case is because you can see I've got the typical Maya folders in there as well as the workspace icon. So I don't have to select anything in here. All I have to do is select the outer one click, and hit set. Very, very important. Setting the project and opening a file are two totally different things. You have to do both, but they're separate. One does not do the other. Now that I've set my project, now I can open my file. File, open scene. And then Maya says, well, which one of these cool files do you want? I want my edge flow activity. And you click open. Don't save. I know it's okay. It's got mental ray nodes. Don't have a cow. Yes, this is a student version. I'm aware of that. So Maya's a bit of a worrywart. It will panic a great deal. Do not go down the panic path with Maya. Does that make sense? Maya's a machine, ones and zeros. It only understands yes and no. Any deviation, panic. So don't worry about it. It's okay. Now, if your scene opens up, it might be colorful like mine, might look gray like that. Don't worry. What we're looking at is the two modes that are one of the two modes that we're talking about in terms of geometry and how it's shown. 4 is wireframe mode. If you press 4 on your keyboard, you're in wireframe wireframe mode. And that's kind of like looking at your geometry like a 3D blueprint. If you press 5 on your keyboard, you are in shaded mode. And that's what makes things look like solid objects. So don't panic if it's a different color. Again, 4 will give you the nice happy colors. 5 will give you the shaded. Now, it's true, we do have an image here in our perspective view, but we do very little in terms of modeling, especially early on with whatever we're building, in the perspective view. What we're going to do is we're going to go to our orthographic views. So make sure you come down here to your front view camera, hit the space bar to make that one bigger, and then that gives us this view. Again, 5, switch to 4. And what you see is we've got a whole bunch of pieces of geometry for you to play with and some really cool images to help guide your process. Here's what I want you to do. Select this piece of geometry in the upper left-hand corner and then press F for frame. And then that will zoom in on that one piece and direct it right to the middle of your screen. And we've got it nice and big. And what you'll notice is I've got this piece of geometry floating just above the image plane. See? There's a picture underneath, the geometry floats just above. Now, in terms of the geometry, the edges go very straight. But if you look at the drawing behind it, there's like a little bit of a wiggle to it. What we're looking at is the edge flow of the geometry, or how the edges move across the surface of the geometry in helping to describe shape and form. These are aspects of modeling as well. Now, in terms of these edges, what we want to learn how to do is go into component mode and change the edge flow of our geometry so that it matches the lines in our reference image behind it. Now, very important for you to realize in terms of changing the edge flow. If you put your cursor over an open space, it is just that. It's an open space. So if I hold down the right mouse button, I'm going to get these aspects that I could call for, but not the components. So if I want the components, what I want to make sure is I'm right over one of the edges, because those are physical at this point. When I shade them, they're physical. When it's in wireframe, I have to be right over the line. And if I hold down my right mouse button, wah! I get my components. So if you go to vertex or vertice mode, again, it turns light blue, which means component. And then I can select a vertice, and then using my move tool, move that vertice, and in so doing, I change the edge flow of my geometry. And I can make the edge flow of my geometry change to better match the illustration behind. Now I can grab more than one component at a time and I can move them. I can use the scale tool to move them. I can use the rotate tool. Anything will allow me to move components. So just make sure you are in component mode, select the vertices that you need to, and then bring them into place. All right, and what we're gonna do is while you're working on that, Brian and I are gonna walk around and see how you guys are doing, look over your shoulder and make sure you're getting this. And any questions you might have, we will do our best to deal with those. But remember, in terms of getting help with this stuff, if you feel like, wow, this didn't go so great in lecture, I had kind of a hard time with this, or it didn't seem very fluid, lab is where you should definitely be working on this, because that's where you're getting one-on-one help whenever and wherever you need it, or get yourself to the Google Hangout so you can get on some one-on-one help in there as well. Also, these activities are for you to practice. So you can go home and work on these things again and again. You know, don't save the file, leave it as factory fresh, and you can work on it as many times as you want to. It's like if you're trying to learn how to hit a baseball, you go to the batting cage, you get a lot of reps in. That's how you get good. You want to get good at this, you want to get fast at this, you do these activities again and again. You will get good, you will get fast. Make sense? Okay, so Brian and I are going to walk around, see how you guys are doing, and we will do our best to answer questions. We do have limited time, so we do have to get to more lecture material. First off, go to your front view camera. That one. Oops, one more. It's okay, hit spacebar again. There you go. That's the one you want to go to. Mm-hmm. All right, now what you did was you accidentally scaled your geometry and made it smaller. Mm-hmm. So here's what I want you to do. Choose your scale tool. Here, click up there for a second. Now click to your scale tool. All right, now scale the middle cube and make it bigger till it matches. There you go. Now press F to frame it. Right mouse button and fix that thing. You got it. What we're doing with these activities is learning the touch and feel that it takes to operate this application. You have to get your hands on it. You got to play with it. That's how you get better. Yeah, that's okay.
That part I understood.
Excellent.
I went into the activities file
Uh-huh.
and then hit set project,
Uh-huh.
but nothing came up on it.
Because setting the project and opening the file are two totally different things. So first you set it, the file open scene, right? So first set it, file, set project.
Oh, I did.
Okay, let's do it again together just to make sure. Choose your activity file folder, whichever one you want to go. All right, hit set. Now go to file open scene. Does that make sense? Now you choose the EdgeFlow activity. Yep. And that's a perfect example of how you can come to a grinding halt because you're one little piece of information and that's all it takes. And then you get super frustrated and you want to just kill people. Yes.
How many should we do? I started.
I would do 3 from each row.
Okay.
So do the 3 from the first row, 3 from the second row, work your way down. And when you get towards the bottom, you will see that we're starting to work in 3D because we're looking at cubes and stuff. So it gets a lot harder. So make sure you're looking at that 3/4 view because we gave you a 3/4 view picture to help you see what it is we're trying to get you to do. Good, good, good. How we doing? Good. Excellent. Yeah, no worries. That happens. Very good. Very good. Getting close. Just like it's easier to work on a big picture, it's easier to work on it's close. So just press F to frame whatever you have selected. So just select that piece. Press F. Way bigger, way easier. You want to work with as big a screen as you can. It makes it easy to make changes and see detail. Good, good, good. All right, how we doing? All right. Make sure you go to your front view camera and you can start making adjustments. 4 view.
Oh, okay.
That view, hit spacebar to make that one bigger. Select that one. Press F to frame it. 4 to put it in wireframe. Now you're ready to start working. Yes, press the B key. You accidentally hit soft select. You're welcome. It's very close to the spacebar, and that happens a lot. If your vertices all light up like rainbow colors, you have accidentally hit soft select, which is, I know, it's a somewhat helpful tool, but for a beginner, it's just more trouble than good. So just hit spacebar or hit B, and that'll deactivate it. Yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't really work on assignments in class. I got to help people with the activities. Good, good. How are we doing? Okay. Okay, first you have to set your project, right? Where's your activity file folder? You downloaded it? Okay, it should be in your downloads folder if you didn't move it. Okay, well first you have to find it then. So figure out where your activity file folder is. Well, do a search of your computer to figure out where it is. Okay, well then what you need to do is make sure you download that file folder because you're going to need that every day. So go to FSO right now and get it and you can catch up. All right? Yes?
Okay. Now I hit something. I don't know what mode this is. I hit some sort of hotkey.
Oh, okay.
I don't know what it was though.
I think you just,
I think 4 or 5 doesn't check it.
That's a good question. I'm not sure what
I
you
can
did.
just reload it.
Can you zoom out a little bit? Let me see what's going on. Oh, I think you're on the other side. Flip it around. Yeah, you're just on the other side.
This is an orthographic view. So.
I think you created another camera, a new front camera, and it's actually on the opposite side. Because if you go to your perspective, don't delete that though.
No.
That's the camera. But if you go to the other side, like hit spacebar, go up there, hit spacebar again, you can see that everything is there.
Yeah.
And if you flip around to the other side, that's what you're looking at.
Okay.
Does that make sense? What you're going to want to do is go to this crazy camera, and this should be front. So go to panels and look for orthographic and choose front, and then you'll be back in that view. Yeah, no worries. All righty, guys. Looks like you guys are doing pretty well with this. I'm very happy to see that. But one quick note that I want to put out there for you guys, whether you're at home or here, I can appreciate the fact that you're trying to get some work done and you might be working on some of your assignments in class. Ill-advised in my opinion, but if you wish to do that, that's fine. But I can't answer questions about other things that you're working on. When we are in class, we are working on the activities, and I really have to concentrate my efforts on that. Does that make sense? I'm not being rude, but I can't go into class material in terms of your assignments when we're doing activities. This is activity time, and I need to make sure I'm helping everybody who needs help with this stuff. Does that make sense? Okay, and it's just the fact that my time is limited. All right, so again, this is a great activity for you in terms of learning how to use the space bar to go to your different windows, to jump around and get to whatever it is you want to work on. It's great for helping you navigate within the window using the F key to frame things. It helps you to get into your component levels, which we are going to be moving in order to change the edge flow of an object and or the shape of the object. So a lot of really helpful things that come from these activities. And each of these activities are kind of like steps on a ladder. They take you to what you need to know ultimately. So if you do each of these steps, you're going to be fine. So make sure you are paying attention and doing your best with these activities. And again, taking notes is of paramount importance. And to be honest with you, if you're struggling a little bit, I know the tendency is to try to kind of move back in the class a little bit, a couple of rows towards the back. But the reality of the situation is if you're struggling, your better bet is to move forward because you need to be more focused and more engaged. The back of the classroom is a place where people can kind of distance themselves a little bit from the material. And I totally get that. I'm definitely a back of the classroom kind of guy myself. You know, you probably wouldn't realize it, but that is true about me. I'm not a front row guy, but I can assure you that the people who get the most out of this class are the ones that sit towards the front. So if you feel like you're having a hard time, try to get here a little early next time and be closer to the front. You're going to have more success. I'm not sure whether it's people who sit in the front have more success or people who've typically enjoyed a lot of success tend to sit towards the front. It's a chicken and egg argument, and I don't know which it is, but I can tell you definitely the first couple of rows are much better for staying engaged with the material, especially if it's completely foreign to you. So don't hide, embrace, go to what you're not good at. Don't hide from it. All right. So let's get back to some more class material. Again, I know it's tough to tear away from Maya after we've been having so much fun, but we got to get through this material as well. But realize that any of these activities that you feel like you need to get better at or they're a lot of fun and you want to do them again, hey, that's what the lab is for. Break those files out again and work on them. All right, let's talk about some modeling concepts here. In terms of the modeling pipeline for our class, we're going to delve into what we call the blockout or primitive build of an object. And again, this is going to help you recognize detail and recreate it to the best of your ability while using your tools of navigation and the windows within Maya. So this is the first stop after we gather our reference for our class in terms of our pipeline. Now, in terms of a blockout, what we come to realize is that objects, no matter how complex their shapes are, they are made of more simple shapes. So what we have to do is kind of look at those simple shapes and recognize those details. So literally, no matter how complex the object is, you can break it down to a few simple shapes. So what we're going to try to do is learn how to recreate those shapes in order to make more complex objects. Now, in terms of the block out, if you take a look here, you can see this is a block out of a pepper mill. And in terms of the block out, what I'm doing is I'm looking at the silhouette of the object that I'm trying to recreate, and I'm creating simple primitives, cylinders, spheres, cubes, and I'm basically shaping them to get them to fill the spaces or the positive space of objects that I'm trying to recreate. So what this will help us do, again, tools of navigation, windows, using a reference, all that good stuff, but it will also help us start to recognize and pay very close attention to the little details that exist in every object that we're trying to build. Because again, those are things that we are grading on, the accuracy in which we create these objects. All right, now I have an activity for you, of course, to help us with this concept of blocking out or primitive build. And this activity basically has us building these 4 objects, and we're going to use simple primitives to fill in as closely as we can the shape and form of the object based on the silhouette that we're looking at. So we're on to another activity here. So I'm going to, since I've already set my project, the great thing about it is once you've set your project to the activity file folder, you don't have to set it again because I'm going to do another activity. So we're not changing gears at all. So I just have to go to File, Open Scene, and then here's where I'm going to go to my blockout activity and open that. No need to save this. Again, these activities are for fun. They're for you. Don't need to save them. Now, one thing you may notice is I have a depth camera on mine, and for some reason, different copies of Maya don't always show this particular view. But don't panic if you don't have it. All this view does is show you the fact that I've got 4 objects in here, and they're sort of staggered. The pencil is sort of forward in front of the chair, in front of the mailbox, and in front of this lamp. And it does kind of give you a 3/4 view of what it is you're looking at. So it just kind of gives you a little bit more of an idea of depth with regard to these objects. But as always, for the most part, as modelers, we deal with the orthographic views. So these are the ones that are really going to make the most difference for us. All right, I'm going to do a primitive build of the pencil, and then you guys can build these other 3 objects. But watch me as I do this, and you'll see how this process goes down. So again, I've got this image plane in here, and again, you have to take my word for it, but that is a pencil. And it is composed of this large shape through here, which is sort of the wooden part of the pencil. We've got the little point of the pencil down here. We've got that metal band that kind of crimps the eraser to the wooden part of the pencil. And those are the primary aspects of this particular silhouette. Now, you'll notice that I have one of these in either view, and it's of the utmost importance that both views match. It's got to look good in both the front and the side in order to be accurate. So let's take a look at how this works. All right. As I have said many times, modeling is a lot like illustration. So just like if I was going to draw this pencil, I would start, let's say I was going to draw this pencil. What shape would I start with? What shape are most pencils? Cylinders, right? So I'm going to start with a cylinder if I'm going to draw it. So if I'm going to model it, guess what I start with? A cylinder. It's not a trick question. So again, I'm going to come over here, and if I look at my polygon modeling tab, you'll see I've got a couple of goodies up here right away. Here's cylinder, so I just click on it, boop, and it appears. Now I'm going to use my move tool to drag it over into place. Now, in terms of this cylinder, I'm trying to get it to match the diameter of this pencil. Now, you'll notice when I've got the scale tool on here, because obviously it's too big and I need to make it smaller. Watch what happens when I scale just using the red cube, right? Ooh, look at that. Oh, it looks good. I like it. Fabulous. Let's take a look at what that looks like in 3D world. All right. Do pencils look like that? No. Even those engineering pencils are sort of flat on the sides, but they're not oval like that, right? So what happens is when I'm using the scale tool and I'm only scaling in X, I'm only scaling in one view, and I'm not maintaining the overall proportion of the shape that I want, right? Cylinder. So rather than using just the X, what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale from the cube in the middle. And what that will do is maintain the proportion of the object while making it smaller. So if I do it like that, you'll notice that I still have a cylinder at the end of the day. Does that make sense? So as a result, when I'm making that shape change, I'm going to scale from the center here rather than using just the X axis. Now, it's kind of difficult sometimes to line up geometry with images on image planes when you can't see the image plane through the geometry. Now, some people do like to model in wireframe mode. What's the key for wireframe? 4 is wireframe, right? Some people can model in that mode. That doesn't really work for me. I'm a very visual kind of person. I need to see the geometry. So what I like to do is I will go to my shading menu set within the window. And under shading, I will choose X-ray mode. And what X-ray mode does for me is it allows me to see not only the geometry, but the image behind. It makes it somewhat transparent so I can see back there. And it's just a little bit easier for me to see the shapes that I'm creating. So now that I'm in X-ray mode, obviously this cylinder is too short. So I'm going to have to make it bigger. So I'm going to pop over to my scale tool. And in this instance, I'm going to scale using the Y axis. And you'll notice that it scales both positively and negatively in Y. And just so you can see that happen, I'll do that over here. Right? And what I'm going to do is try to scale it and move it into place. And again, I'm just sort of trying to cover the image plane, or cover the image in the image plane. I'm going to bring it down just a little bit. That's looking pretty good. Come up here, looking pretty good. Okay, so I got that matching pretty good. Time for me to check my other view. Very, very important. Don't spend too much time in one view, because what ends up happening is you'll do a lot of manipulation in one view and it'll look great. And then you'll pop over to another view and go, oh my goodness, I've got a very dense brick. So in order to avoid situations where one view has a lot of change in it and one view does not, periodically we have to pop from window to window and make sure that they are matching up. So I leave this window for a minute by hitting spacebar, and I come over here and I see, okay, it's lined up perfectly here, but it's not even close over here. It should be over in this area. Again, I know, what am I thinking? Again, I need to make sure that both views agree in order for me to make sure things are lining up properly. It's kind of like the idea that we have two eyes on our head. That's how we have binocular vision. It allows us to cross our field of vision so we can figure out the relative depth of objects. With that, we have the ability to throw things and hit them with relative accuracy, which varies from person to person. But if you cover one eye and try to throw something at something else, it is very difficult to hit it. So idea here is I need a front and a side view so I can crisscross and make sure things are lined up. So this view looks fabulous, this view does not. So I'm just going to pull this over here, and again I'm going to maximize that window and make sure that I line that up to the best of my ability. And then when it looks good here and it looks good over here, then I know I'm on the right path. Make sense? Both views have to agree. Now, time to do this next shape here. All right, my next biggest shape is this shape here. Again, this is that metal band that sort of crimps the eraser to the wooden part of the pencil. This is also most likely a cylinder. So if I wanted to, I could just create another cylinder, right? Boop. Yay, another cylinder. And this one also appears in X-ray mode because I'm in X-ray mode in this particular window. You will note that over here, I am not in X-ray mode. That's because this window has its own menu set, which I have to choose X-ray to make that one an X-ray as well. All right. Now, in terms of this cylinder, yeah, I can make one and then now bring it over here and size it and figure it all out like I did before. However, that takes time, right? What if I just took this cylinder and made a copy of it? What if I just duplicate that thing and then work from there, because that's going to save me a lot of time. So what I'm going to do is select this cylinder, and I'm going to go to Edit and choose Duplicate. And that's going to make a second cylinder. Now the thing is that's tricky about it is you don't realize that it's made a second cylinder, because when you make a duplicate of something, the duplicate appears right on top of the original. So right now, if you look in my hand, I have P cylinder 1, polygon cylinder 1, right? When I make a duplicate, edit, duplicate, you'll see now it says P cylinder 2. That's because now I'm holding the duplicate. So I can take this cylinder and you'll see, oh yeah, there's the second one. There's the first one, right? So now that I've got this second cylinder, what I'm going to do is I'm going to shrink it down, because obviously the cylinder that makes the metal band is smaller. I'm going to use my move tool. I'm going to drag it into place. Use my F key to get me nice and close. I'm going to line up that cylinder. It's a little too small, so I'm going to embiggen it. And then I'm going to squashinate it. All right, move it into place. Looking pretty good in this view. Let's see how we're doing over here in this view. Oh, looks like it's not lining up perfectly. So I'm going to have to shift it a little bit in this view. Bring it down a little bit. And then you may notice, well, wait, it looks like it's coming up a little bit low in this view. And it's a little bit high in that view. Oh, what do I do there? The reality of the situation is image planes aren't perfect any more than we are. There's always going to be, well, not always, but a very high likelihood that not everything is going to line up absolutely perfectly. So what happens is, as an artist, we have to make a call. We have to make a decision. Do I favor one view over another? Or do I maybe just split the difference between the two? This one's a little high, that one's a little low. That's going to work. Does that make sense? Now, in terms of making a call, how do I choose one view over another? Well, you have to actually think of how the object is going to be viewed, right? Let's take, for example, horses. If you're looking at a movie or a video game or whatever that has horses in it, do you see the horses more from the front, or do you see horses more from the side? When you're way more from the side, right? That's the more interesting angle of a horse. No offense to horses. But in terms of that situation, since I'm going to see a horse from a side more often than the front, if my front view and my side view don't quite give me the best information, which one should I favor? The side. You got to make sure you're using the view that is most likely to be utilized. Does that make sense? When it comes to human beings, do we see human beings in games or movies more from the side or more from the front? More from the front. So if my front view and my side view conflict with a human being in terms of my reference, I'm going to favor which view? The front, because that's the one I'm more likely to see. Does that make sense? So in some instances, because references are not perfect, I have to make a call. So in this instance, since it's in theory, this object is perfectly symmetrical, and I'm not going to favor one view over the other, I'm just going to split the difference between it. It's going to end up being a little bit low in this one, a little bit high in that one, but it's going to be close enough for government work, and we'll be just fine. Because luckily, we work in the entertainment field. No one is going to be hurt if I don't model this pencil properly. But if I'm using this 3D application to design and build cars, every bolt has to be the right size. Every piece of metal has to be perfectly placed, or there's going to be an accident. Does that make sense? But yay, we work in entertainment. It's all good. So again, we got that band in place. Let's make one more duplicate. Edit, duplicate. And then this one will ultimately be the eraser. So I'm going to scale that guy, line it up, use my move tool. Always a great idea to name stuff as you go. Click the field. Get all that stuff going. Again, looks pretty good here. Let me check my other view. Looks pretty good there. All right. Last little bit, last little detail. The part where the lead goes. What shape do you guys think I would use there if I was going to draw it? Cone, very close, right? So guess what I'm going to use? The cone. So I create the cone, I'm going to put that in place. What's wrong with it? It's upside down. So I'm going to use my rotate tool. I'm going to flip it over 180 degrees. And then I'm going to move that into place, and it's a little bit too big, so I'm going to have to scale it down. Again, I'm going to scale from the cube in the center to maintain proportion as best I'm able. Line that thing up, right? Looks good here. What have I not done though? Check my other views. You got to hop over to my other views, and then you, oh my goodness, it's all the way over here, right? So if you take a look, you can see, oh yeah, if I don't line stuff up in both views, it can be way off, even though it looks just fine. So I got to make sure I take that bad boy, move him right over there, and line him up. All right. So if it looks good here and it looks good here, I know I'm all good out here. And when I take a look, I see, oh yeah, look at that. Looks just like a pencil. So I want you guys to play a little bit. Try to make the chair, the mailbox, and the lamp. Incidentally, this is a cylinder in terms of the lamp shade. This is a elongated sphere. So just bear that in mind when you're making those shapes. Try to build these three here. Another little hint is if you make one leg the right size, you can duplicate that and scoot it over to make the other leg, because they're going to be the same size, or at least they look that way in this particular image. And then once you've got those two legs, you can select them both and take those two legs and make duplicates and scoot them over there, and then you got all four. So anything that happens more than once, we can just get one of them right and then scale them and move them all around to wherever we need them. Also, again, this is a mailbox, which is sort of curved on the top, so bear that in mind when you're making your choices for shapes in there. And again, this is a cylinder. All right, so Brian and I will walk around and see how you guys are doing with this. And again, any questions you have, that would be a good time to do it, and see what we can figure out. How are we doing? Good, good? Excellent. All right. Good job. Very good. Yes?
So in this view,
Mm-hmm.
I had realized that the can't, even though I'm in the right view, like if I want to go here and do this, right?
Mm-hmm.
The one thing is that it's locked when I try to move it and focus on just one thing.
Well, right now, what you've got is you've selected the image plane. So when you press F, it's trying to frame that whole image plane. If you want to get on the pencil, select the pencil and hit F. Now you're in on the pencil.
How do I,
Does that make sense? It depends on what you select. Don't select the picture. Select the object.
how do I move the whole thing like I was doing on the first
Well,
one?
if you selected the picture, which you don't want to do, you don't want to move the picture, you want to move the objects. But now all you have to do is, now that you got the move tool on there, just grab it. Use the arrows.
No, that part I understood.
Oh, okay.
I'm saying before I was able to, when it zoomed in,
Mhm.
say if I wanted to hold this down and move it, it would move.
Oh, okay. You want to use your option key with your left, right, or middle mouse button. Hold down the middle mouse.
This one,
Mm-hmm.
it was the middle mouse button.
There you go. Yep. All good. Yes. Mm-hmm. Go to Edit, Duplicate. There you go. And your duplicate is right on top of the original. So when you move it, you'll see the one you made.
so easy. I can basically just.
Right, because you don't have a mouse or your pen tablet.
I have my tablet.
Okay, well, what you need to do is hook that up because Maya is basically a two-handed application. So you're always going to be doing both.
Yeah.
So you're holding option with one button and then you're using your right, left, and middle mouse button. Yeah.
So it's optional.
No, you have to use option in conjunction with a 3-button device. Yeah, you really can't run Maya with the trackpad.
No, yeah. I was just
Yeah.
earlier.
Yeah, it's that. Good, good. Did you get your activity files? Awesome. All right. So open up the one called Blackout. What's that?
My Mac broke in Techno 10.
Oh, okay.
So I'm using my own.
Okay.
But it's just difficult with my mouse.
Right. Yeah, no, you definitely need a mouse or bring your tablet. Yep. Yep. No, that's fine. But you're going to use your orthographic views. Yep. See? There's your pencil. You start with that one. But you definitely need a mouse or your tablet with your pen. Okay. Yeah, because you're definitely going to need that because this application is almost impossible to run without.
Yeah, I found that out.
Yeah. It doesn't take much, but at least you've got that worked out. That's good.
Sense to you, and it's the quickest. Pretty good, man.
Good. Yeah, no, they're doing all right.
You got to jump on it over the holiday.
Well, some people will take your advice and cash in, and others will assume you don't know what you're talking about. and then they have trouble. So, but yay for the people who believed us.
Steve, this was not cold.
Really?
And now it's cold.
It's me.
I think you bring freeze.
I am. I like it just a little. I like it just a little bit chilly.
So your hands will.
Exactly. I don't want to be able to type. I got all kind. And you know what? This light above my head is so bright. It's reflecting off of the table, and so my mouse activity is not good. Because it needs to be dark, or it conflicts with the laser thing on the bottom. If I could just smash that one light, things would be so much easier. Or there's something wrong with my mouse. There's a possibility of that as well, but I'm gonna go with the lights. No mercy. Give him heck on that. It's a cylinder, dang it. All right. So again, this activity is going pretty well. It looks like you guys have a good idea of what's going on. My hope is that you are starting to realize that what I'm talking about is for Rizzle. When I say you got to write this stuff down, because if you're missing one little tiny piece, you struggle. And then the other thing is, you can see right away how well you're understanding the material, because if I just explained to you how to do something and you can't do it in the activity, you missed a big piece of what we just talked about. So literally, as we move through class, you know how you're doing. So if I tell you about something and you can do it easy peasy, you're doing great. Does that make sense? It affirms that you're doing a good job. Always ask questions though. And again, anything that you struggled with in lecture, that is an immediate, jot that down in your notes. This is something I need some help with. And then when you get to lab, you grab those instructors and please help me understand this piece of the puzzle, because I don't get this. Because this isn't really one of those I'll get it later things. You need to know this stuff now, because the class progresses and each thing is a step. And if you were missing a step, you will likely fall off the ladder. So don't miss a step. Make sure you've got everything you need to be successful. Yes. You know what? Let me check. I don't normally carry tissues with me because I never cry. That's not true. I cry all the time. I'm crying a lot right now, in fact, on the inside. But no, I don't have a tissue. And yes, this room is very cold today, and Brian pointed out it's totally my fault. So I apologize for that. You guys want to know why I run around so much? It's to stay warm. So yeah, I'm sorry. The room's cold. Tell online that the place is cold. They can't tell. Yeah, they're at home in their bathrobes eating Pop-Tarts and drinking tea. So they're having a good day. Lucky devils. All right. So let's talk about your skill check. Basically, the way skill checks work is skill check is a culmination of everything you've learned. So basically, I teach you some information, we do an activity. I teach you some information, we do an activity. At the end of the day, we have a skill check. And those skill checks are basically the culmination of everything we've talked about so far this day. So there's a skill check for every day except the very last one. And as you guys recall, these things are worth 1% of your grade. They are so super easy to do. And again, they affirm that you understand what it is we've talked about today. And literally, it will boost your grade a full letter grade. So like if you had a C in the class and you do all of the skill checks, you just got a B. If you had a B in the class and you do all the skill checks, you just got an A. So it is well worth it to do these on the level of I need to understand the material and on the level of I'd like to get the best possible grade. And I can assure you, and Brian will back me up on this one, the people who do less well in this class, they aren't doing the skill checks. Like it's almost a direct correlation. You don't do the skill checks, you struggle mightily with this class. That is the way it goes. So make sure you're doing these skill checks, put your effort into it. And again, this is what you can be working on in lab, getting some guidance and some feedback one-on-one to make sure you understand each little rung on this ladder we're trying to build. So let's take a look at the skill check where we are going to be blocking out an asset. And again, that's our term for objects that we build for whatever it's being used for. So if it is a skill check, that is a different folder. Just like we have an activity file folder for our activities that we do in class together, we have a skill check file folder, and that's for our daily skill checks. So we have to set our project again because Maya, of course, thinks we're still doing activities. So I'm going to have to come up here and go File, Set Project. And here's where I'm going to choose my skill check file folder, also a download from FSO. So make sure you got that every day with you. And I'm going to set my project to that outer folder. And then I'm going to go to File, Open Scene. And I'm going to do my jar asset start file. So select that guy, open it up. And when it opens up, you'll see, oh yeah, I've got this picture of a jar in that view. I got a picture of a jar in that view. And what we're going to do is do that block out or primitive build to try to create this thing. Now, in terms of this object, if I was going to draw a jar, what would I start with? Cylinder, right? So modeling, same thing. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to make a cylinder. And I'm going to go to this front view here. And again, I'm going to try to occupy shape and form. What do I like to do with my geometry so I can see the picture behind? X-ray mode, it's my friend. So I'm going to go to shading and I'm going to choose X-ray so that I can see through my geometry. And I'm going to scale, again, not from one axis or the other, but I'm going to scale from the middle here. And again, I'm just trying to make sure that my cylinder fills this space that is dictated by this object here, the positive space of the jar. And again, I need to make that a little bit bigger here. Use my move tool, scoot it up. And again, this view is looking fabulous. Let's come over here and make sure this one's working as well. I'm going to have to activate X-ray in this one. And then when it's looking good here and it's looking good here, I know I'm positioned well out here. So now my next biggest shape, because I already got the biggest shape, the next biggest one is this sort of lip area up here. Now, what do you think I would use for that? Let's try cylinder first, then try sphere. All right, first we'll go with a cylinder. So I'll make another one of those guys. And again, I'm going to move it into place. Right. Move tool. But I'm not getting this sort of inward thing here. And based on what we know how to do so far, that's not going to do it for me. It's close, but not quite. I'm getting some, you know, semblance of a top there, but it's not quite the form. What's that? Ah, but we haven't covered that yet. So based on what we've talked about so far, which is where a lot of us are, I'm going to use another object in this instance. But we will talk about manipulation of vertices for shape and form, but that's next class. So for this one, again, what we know so far, I'm going to need a different shape. What other shape do you think I need? Sphere? A tetrahedron. And incidentally, in terms of shapes, there's a couple here on my shelf, but if you go to create polygon primitives, you'll see, oh, look at all these cool ones. So there's a whole bunch that we don't even, what? They make a soccer ball? Yes! But anyway, so there's a bunch in here, so don't feel like you are limited to exactly what is on this shelf. But in terms of this shape here, doesn't that look kind of like an ice cream cone? Yeah. Yeah, so maybe we should go with cone on this one. So I'm going to create a cone. It's pretty cool, but it's facing the wrong direction. So I'm going to roll it over. Again, 180 degrees, because that means flipped it right over. I'm going to use my move tool, put it into place, and I must embiggen it. And again, this is just to help us kind of recognize shape and form in an object and help us try to match that silhouette of the shape and form. This is not at all modeling, not even close. But what we're doing right now is we're learning to use image planes, we're learning to create polygon primitives, we're moving them around using our tools of manipulation. So these are all exercises geared towards those kinds of ideas. We will get into actual modeling next class. All right, so again, looks good here and looks good here, then I know I'm going the right path over here. Now my next smallest detail is this little sort of rim, this little rib around the outside there. And I want to make sure that I hit that. What do you think I could use to hit that thing?
Circle.
I could use a torus. Okay, yep, the torus or the donut, as people call it sometimes. It's basically sort of a ring, so it really kind of encapsulates what we're looking for that shape. So what I'm going to do is move that guy into place here, and I'm going to scale it and make it bigger. Scooch it over a little bit here, and then I'm going to use my scale tool and kind of squash it down a little bit there. Put it into place. Looking pretty good there. Come over here. Oh, it's a little bit off. So I'll get it over there. When it looks good here and there, I know I'm on the right path here. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, as I said, we have not gotten into modeling yet, so I have not shown you how to make this thing hollow. We're going to work on that because jars are hollow, but we'll touch on that Wednesday. So next class we'll delve into that. But at this point, this object is looking pretty good. Now, in terms of the geometry, again, great idea to start getting into the habit of naming this stuff. Give these things names so that they're not P sphere or P cube or whatever. Give them names. Always a good idea. And, why not make a layer for it? Because we know how to do that. Let's start getting into these habits because these things are going to have to be done on our weekly turn-ins when we get to those. So why not start getting into that stuff now? Jar layer. And even though this is made of many pieces, I want all 3 pieces to be on this layer. Right mouse button, add selected objects. So now every piece disappears when I click that. So you want to make sure that that's what it's doing. and that gives you a fully functional layer. And again, these pictures, they're awesome. I love them because they help me figure out what my model looks like. It helps me to model quickly and accurately. But after I'm done, I don't really need these things anymore. So what we're going to do is get rid of those images. So how do we get rid of images? If we go to Edit, delete all by type, image planes, because that's what these things are, is image planes. What this will do is remove all of the images in our scene and all of the nodes associated with those image planes. They're out of there. So now this thing is ready to go, right? Put it into wireframe in all my views by pressing 4. And then now I can save this thing. And in terms of the naming, so critical that you name things properly. I know it doesn't seem like a big deal. You're like, as long as I did it and it looks great, what difference does it make? But the problem is when you are working in a team, there are a bunch of people who are going to be looking for this thing, because whatever it is they're doing, your thing is going to be added to it. So there's sort of this big bin of stuff. And if stuff isn't named properly, they can't find it. And that's time wasted. And literally in this line of work, time is absolutely money, and it can be calculated. So you don't want to be wasting any time. So what we want to do is make sure we name things properly. Oh, also, if we're building assets that are going to be going into a game engine, if you don't name the asset properly, the game engine can't find it and it won't run. And it's just like trying to sign into your email. If it's supposed to be uppercase and you did lowercase, or there's supposed to be, you know, some kind of punctuation or a number or a special character, and you don't put it in there, you're not getting in. Same thing holds true with assets that we're building for a video game. So we got to name things right. So when it comes time to name your files, File, Save Scene As, and we're going to use the naming convention for this class. Actually, it's not even just this class. Literally, the whole time you're here at Full Sail, this is going to be the naming convention, so learn it now, and then you don't have to worry about it. It's last name underscore first name underscore what this thing is. This is skill check 1. Lecture 1, or sorry, 2. Skill check. Underscore, what class are we in? 3DF. Underscore the year and the month you took the class. So this is the year 2018, and we are in the 12th month. So it is 18 for 2018 and 12. Does that make sense? This is the correct naming convention. If you did anything different than this, you can lose up to 9 points on anything you submit. Nearly a letter grade. Please, if I could say one thing to you guys about doing well in this class, don't miss points on the easy stuff. There are many, many easy points to get. There are also some hard ones, okay? Get the easy ones, because that will bolster the hard stuff that you may or may not get. It just breaks my heart when I see somebody go down a full letter grade or fail a project because they didn't do the little stuff. You know, do the little stuff. And all that is paying attention, look for the details, and follow instructions, which again seems like not that big a deal. Huge in this line of work. So important. Every little detail. It actually does matter. Does that make sense? This isn't art. This is business art. It's a whole other animal. You got to do it that way. So I have it named properly, but here's a thing that tends to catch people, and I want to draw your attention to it. If you notice the original file that I build this thing out of, it's an MA file. And MA is the variety of file. Maya files come in 2 types, MA and MB. Maya ASCII and Maya binary. And in terms of, it's like chocolate and vanilla. They're both ice cream, so it doesn't really matter. You can save a file as any type you wish. Except in these more recent versions of Maya, what I have noticed is if the original's an MA, you have to save your copy as an MA also. It will not change the variety. Does that make sense? If it was a chocolate to begin with, you got to save it as chocolate again. So even though I've named it a different name, I've got to come here to the drop down and choose and match exactly what the original was. So the original's an MA, so I choose MA, Maya ASCII, and then now when I save it, it will save it. If I don't have the right variety and I try to save it as a different type, Maya says, I can't save it, error nodes, string issue, panic, 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 and I'll see a lot of red down here. and it won't save. So make sure you're matching the original file type. It's just something weird that recent copies of Maya, that's what it does. All right? Any questions on your skill check? What am I doing? Where am I going? What am I responsible for? Where am I having lunch? No? You're going to take a nap? Well, you can do whatever you want with your time after the class is over. Work on Maya. But you the choices are yours. Work on Maya. But I let you make those choices because you're old enough. Work on Maya. But what I would say, oh, important thing, we have a meeting on Wednesday. So, and that meeting is at 2:30. So what's going to happen is you guys are the first shift of lab, which starts at 1 p.m. So when you guys do your break at 2? Do you remember what time you do your break? I don't remember offhand. Your first break is at 4? Now I was going to say, I think it's like 3. So what's going to end up happening, because you guys need food, water, and restroom. But I think what's going to happen there is you'll go a little bit early to your break because we have a 2:30 meeting we all have to go to. Both Brian, myself, Marcus, and Sarah. So we'll all be there. So I think what will end up happening that day is you'll go on break just a tiny bit early, just so that that's what's happening. Does that make sense? So we have to do that meeting thing. And we'll talk about it again on Wednesday so you'll remember. But I like to put that information out early so it's not a surprise. Okie dokie? All right. Now, as long as you guys are good, I'm going to let you go. Thank you very much. You did an excellent job today. We're going to do it again on Wednesday. Bring your A game. Make sure you've got a mouse or your pen or your tablet with you because you're going to need one of those things to get this stuff done. I'll see you then. Thank you very much. Thank you, Brian. Yep, you still come back at 1. Your lab is at 1 p.m. if you're in my local class. Yes. Oh, that looked pretty good, man.
Pretty good?
Yeah, that's a good chair. Nice job.
Thank you. Was there a sign-in today?
No, we didn't do a sign-in because I didn't know how long today's lecture was going to go, so I'm just going to take it from the lab. So for everybody who came in late, you got off easy today.